have long been celebrating the redemption arc for Fantasy Life Director Level 5. Quite some time ago, they announced a number of new Nintendo-centric projects that were coming to Nintendo Switch, including a new Fantasy Life, a new Professor Layton, a new IP called Deca Police. Level 5 seems to have made a glorious comeback after a brief stint, decade-long stint, into mobile game development. Back in the 2000s, these guys were producing some of the most successful games on Nintendo DS. Definitely some of the most successful third-party games, and have kind of established a template as to all you really have to do to succeed on Nintendo hardware is just produce games that people actually want to play. Level 5 seems to understand this formula very well, and they have consistently been able to put out a wide range of titles across a wide range of genres that are all radically different from each other, and yet at the same time they all seem to have very common reoccurring problems. And unfortunately, having played Fantasy Life 2 all the way up until the final dungeon, I can safely say that Fantasy Life 2 is no different. It looks great. It has a lot of great ideas. It's fun to play. It has a lot of variety, a ton of content. And yet, I can't say I can recommend this over better alternatives. The thing about Fantasy Life 2 is that it's pretty clearly influenced by a number of better Nintendo games, including The Legend of Zelda, Animal Crossing, Rune Factory. The list goes on and on and on. You are going to be playing this game, and if you have any kind of history with this kind of genre before, life sim, if you've ever played a life sim before, you are going to be in familiar territory. Fantasy Life 2 does not innovate. It does not evolve the life sim genre. It's essentially just a very well presented, very well constructed, very simplistic game targeted towards younger audiences that has a shocking amount of content and things to do in it. Because this is the weird thing about Fantasy Life 2 is that the core difference between this and what I think Nintendo does is that Nintendo produces games for all ages, while Level 5 produces games for children. And that is a very palpable difference that I think a lot of people who don't play both would not pick up on. Because Nintendo games have complexity, they have depth, they have things going on with them, they have integrity, creativity. They are the best at what they do. That appeals to all ages, just like classic Disney animation or Harry Potter or all these things that were intended for a younger audience and yet have become major cultural milestones and achievements, right? We have seen this happen time and time again. But with Level 5, its presentation, its style of gameplay, of storytelling, it is so simplistic and bare bones and has so many mistakes. It is, for all intents and purposes, the stereotype of what people think of when they think of children's media, because it is overly ambitious and does not deliver on anything substantial. Level 5 tries to do a lot with their games. They try to have memorable characters and ideas and stories and iconography and just unique, interesting mechanics. But all of it just comes together to be an overly simplified mess that just amounts to simply just grinding through this repetitive, boring life sim. And that is unfortunately the case with Fantasy Life 2. It is a grindy mess with not a whole lot of payoff. I was shocked, playing through this game, booting it up and seeing just how many things there were to do, how many like paths you can take when it comes to your character building and the things you can do. But like I found very, very quickly that it really doesn't matter. Like it doesn't matter what you do or like how you spend your time. You're going to level up no matter what. And at the end of the game, you're going to need to have a significant amount of time put into like every single class, almost every single class, in order to advance and to beat the game. Like, the game is insanely padded out with unnecessarily long, like, and tedious mini games.
This is right when I make the comeback.
And an unnecessary amount of grinding. It requires you to beat the same enemies over and over again
all that
with
shitty
different
talk.
classes. It has you like spending way too much time like just doing tedious busy work. So you can go about doing whatever it is you're trying to do. And there is no real payoff, Like, I found myself, after a certain amount of time just ignoring the jobs, just ignoring the life, and just going through, like, the core gameplay loop of, like, exploring a new area, going through the quest, like learning more about like, what's going on with the world and the setting and all that stuff. And like what I found was something that wants to be this cool, interesting fantasy story, but essentially just boils down to a bunch of silly jokes and just simplistic combat. The game just doesn't make you feel as if its ideas are worth investing in, Like, it's so confusing to me, like, how this game is structured, because you technically have, like, 3 different time periods. You have, like, the past, the present, and then this weird alternate reality
place, like,
called Ginormsia.
Wow, okay.
Right? All
Someone
of
who's
which
like a master
have
rank,
completely different mechanics, all of which have
legit
completely different characters to interact with, have different things you can do.
Almost as good.
You can, like, build a town and a community in the present, but, like, you go through preset areas in the past, like,
But anyway,
you get into combat situations.
Like, he's just making
the
fun
primary
of me playing the game. Like,
progression through the story is in the past, and you occasionally go back to the present to interact with something or to do something, or like just engage with unique mechanics. And I found that this is just me talking, but like I found myself not engaging with the third area at all. Ginormsia, like, which is this giant open area map with like all these like weird, poorly explained like aspects to it. Like, I did not find a single reason to go to that area until the very, very end of the game, until they tell you that you have to, in order to uncover the secret weakness of like the dark dragon that you've been trying to beat this entire time, right? There was no build up to this, there was no reason to explore Ginormsia. Playing the game and seeing how tedious like most of the side content actually was, I decided to focus on the story.
To level up our lumberjack skill.
And the story was good enough to keep me playing, engaged for like a good 13 hours or so, right? But then, I spend 5 hours grinding out, the final set of like equipment so I can go to the final dungeon, and like they keep stacking on more and more things you have to do. You have to, like, gather the materials. You have to, like, blacksmith it. You have to cook something for some reason. And then at the end, you have to, like, paint on it. It's like, it's so absurdly ridiculous. And at the end, they're just like, oh, by the way, we also need to find the dragon's weakness. Like, where was this explained? Like, I just spent almost half of my total playtime grinding.
Why can't I get like my expert
so I can beat this game? And yet, at the end of it, it's just
I chose a different life, so like
it just becomes even more of a grind.
Tell me how it should work.
And it's just so frustrating because this game absolutely 100% has a lot going for it. Its actual core mechanics are well thought out and work well enough. But the game expects you to spend way too much time with each one of them, even though there's simply not enough like general payoff for you to engage with them in general gameplay. It is an extremely well-made life sim that doesn't give you a reason to play the life sim. It's kind of like if imagine if Harvest Moon, like you spend all your time like harvesting vegetables, you put them in the bin, and then you never get paid for it. That's kind of how this feels like. It feels like they never gave you like that reward for pursuing each individual life. I remember when I first started playing and I first started, going down all these career paths, and I'm just like, oh man, like there are so many characters, they all have fun designs and personalities, and they all like do this, and this. You have to go through like little quests for them and stuff like that. It's really well thought out and interesting. And then you do more of them and kind of realize like two things. Like, first of all, that it's the same thing over and over again. Crafting jobs are all the same. And gathering jobs are all the same, essentially. You're just performing different actions to level up, like, different stats. Like, instead of, like, compiling, like, combat, gathering, and crafting into, like, one general stat, like, each individual job, does, like, there's, like, several of them. I think, like,
for 2 seconds.
I want to say, like, 15 of them. Like, each individual job has its own, like, quest line, its own master that you have to report to, like, a number of, like, side missions you have to partake in if you're going to advance, right? And these all take hours and hours and hours and hours to do. Even just one. And, like, it's so grindy and so repetitive. And when you do enough of them, you start realizing that you are doing the same thing over and over and over again. All you're doing is going to the starting area, interacting with the stuff there, going to the second area, interacting with the stuff there, going to the third area, interacting with the stuff there, because, like, the game just doesn't have a well thought out progression system. There is no like feeling of organic growth. You just coincidentally like go on your adventure and get like higher level stuff like in later areas. But if you're like me and are going to focusing on the story, you're going to see higher level things in the later areas and be forced to ignore them because you haven't been leveling up that specific stat. And there were stats that I was focusing on developing, but like that was out of this sense of like necessity, like I was leveling up the stats that I wanted to use, that I wanted to focus on, but like the game really focuses, like it's like the game wants you to be like a jack of all trades, except not really, because you have to be a master at everything at the end. It's just, you can't
we gotta keep
do everything the game sets out to do. Like, it's just so pointlessly time-consuming and repetitive. Like, I have no idea, like, what they were thinking when they put this together. It's just so irritating to look back on it and just realize just how much time I wasted, like trying to like, uncover the mystery of the story and like uncovering the story beats and like getting to the end of the game, because at the end of the day, like none of it really matters. The game is simply underwhelming. It really needed to have a better focus on what actually matters. Like, it needed to make doing the jobs more interesting and more rewarding, instead of this like really uninspired JRPG plot that even references how obvious the villain is. It's unbelievably lame. Like, definitely one of those like 6, 7 out of 10 games that I think some people will really, really enjoy. And that's kind of my big takeaway from this, is that, like, this game has clearly been very, very successful. Like, I do think for, like, less experienced players, for kids who, like, don't really have a lot of experience with games, who don't know what this game is, like, plagiarizing and, like, want something a little bit more simplistic, right? This might be a good entry point into the genre, because it's not too heavy on lore, it's relaxing, it's comfy, it's, like, reasonably fun to play, If it wasn't for the grinding, like, I would have given it like a way more positive score. Like, like all the mechanics like are functional and they work. There's no major glitches or issues. You know, it's better than Cyberpunk 2077 in other words. But like at the end of the day, like you do have to acknowledge that like if you're going to play a game like this, like you have to make the content more engaging. And I think for someone like me who has played games like this, like extensively and really enjoys a wide range of games in the genre, like I can't imagine that anybody with more experience would really get that much value out of this game. Is kind of my take on it. Like I think that the two groups of people who will play this are people who have just played everything else on Nintendo Switch 2 and played everything every other life sim on Switch 1 and are just looking for something fresh, new, and exciting to play, right, for a couple of hours during the launch period, and kids. Like, I think kids will really enjoy this game for what it is, because I think it does do a good job, making itself presentable, making itself like reasonably appealing. It's certainly not a terrible game, and I do think that's like something I really need to preface, as I finish my thoughts here, because like I feel like I've been kind of emphasizing the negative. Like I feel like the game is genuinely entertaining. There are things to like about it when it comes to the character designs and some of the story beats and some of the things they do and like some of the ideas. Like, it makes me hope that Level 5 will like get their act together and really shape up for a proper sequel. But like, this is the thing with Level 5, and something that I really want to emphasize, like this has been my experience with them ever since I picked up like Professor Layton and the Cursed Mask a decade ago, right? Like, I have always had these kind of issues with Level 5, especially when it comes to the story and the characters and some of the decisions they make creatively. Like, they never seem to live up to their own potential. And it's so frustrating as someone who really wants to see them do well and who really wants them to like really figure out like how to just put out bangers time after time again. Like, they never really quite like hit the levels of something like Pokemon or like what Nintendo like delivers on with every major release. Like, Level 5 like always seems to fall short. And what's especially frustrating is that like they never seem to understand how to fix the problem or even understand what the problem is. And I think a big reason for that is because these games are so successful. They are popular. People do like them, and it's just kind of frustrating as someone who like has always been rather critical of this company to see them make this like glorious return to form and just put out something that wasn't like better than what they were putting out before. And that's kind of my mindset on Fantasy Life 2. It's not better than like other Level 5 games. It's not better than other Nintendo Switch or Nintendo Switch 2 games in the market. Like, you are probably better off playing Animal Crossing or like, any of the other numerous like Harvest Moon games or Rune Factory available on the console, right? Like, again, Fantasy Life is perfectly serviceable as a life sim. But when you're comparing it to like some of the all-time greats, when you're comparing it to Rune Factory 4, this game falls way, way short. And it really needs to be talked about among the community.